911. It's good to see you all. My name is Zach LaValley. I'm the EVP of Engineering here at RapidSOS. Glad that you're spending part of your day with us here at Ready23. Ready23, hosted by RapidSOS. If you're not familiar with us, RapidSOS, we're an intelligence safety platform, securely linking life-saving data to monitoring centers, 911, and first responders across the country and the globe. At Ready23, we aim to foster a sense of unity and shared purpose among all stakeholders in the emergency response ecosystem. It's an opportunity to connect, collaborate, and catalyze change in the world of public safety and emergency responses. And we encourage you to actively participate and engage with this session on this platform and within WOVA. Today, I'm joined by three amazing technologists, and we're going to have a quick conversation around AI and multimedia transforming public safety. But it's my pleasure to introduce Rob Huberty, co-founder and chief operating officer at ZeroEyes, Jeff Bruns, CEO and co-founder of Convey 911, and Jehan Wickramasuriya, corporate VP of AI and intelligence platforms at Motorola Solutions. So thank you all for joining us. I'd love it if the three of you guys could just do a quick intro of yourselves, a little bit of your background, what your companies, your roles are trying to do, and how it intersects with public safety and AI. So maybe we'll start with Rob and then go to Jeff and then Jehan.
Yeah, so I'm Rob Huberty. I'm the CEO, one of the co-founders of ZeroEyes. I think my story, like where I grew up, kind of affects where I'm at right now. So I grew up in a town called Monroe, Connecticut, and I went to a middle school that was called Chalk Hill, which was subsequently renamed Sandy Hook Elementary School. I graduated high school in 1999. I went to the University of Arizona. I went to school with some of the survivors from Columbine, probably about 20 of them. And that was my college experience. And that was just a couple months after that event occurred. September 11th had a profound impact on me. So after that, after I graduated college, I enlisted in the Navy and I was a SEAL for about 10 years. I got out of the SEAL teams to have a family. My wife's a teacher. We got married in a courthouse in Virginia Beach that also had a mass shooting. And I went and got my MBA. I went and worked for Amazon, and I didn't really find an itch that kind of scratched what I wanted to do. And then the Parkland shooting happened in 2018, and we looked at the camera footage and we said, what would have happened if somebody would have seen this shooter before they ever pulled the trigger? And we said, isn't there a technology that can see guns? Like that seems, I saw it in RoboCop and the Terminator in the 80s. Doesn't this exist? And it turns out that it didn't. So we created that. So ZeroEyes is a company where we process all of your video frames to see if there's guns being openly carried. It's out in the open. It's not concealed. We've been doing it for about 5 years now. We're all over the nation. I think we're in 40 states at this point, and we're continuing to grow and reduce gun violence.
Yeah, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Zach. So Jeff Bruns, co-founder and CEO and longtime technologist at Convey 911. My story, kind of similar to Rob's, is intertwined with public safety. I joined the fire service when I was 17 outside of Washington, D.C., and was a volunteer firefighter for about 17 years until family and life kind of took over. But kind of long and storied history in the fire service, co-founded several startups earlier in my career, the last of which was a cloud-based fire station learning solution. So, I had encountered language barriers, in kind of my role in the fire service, and Convey 911, our mission is to bridge the language access gap, thinking about the kind of stories around immigration, thinking about, how many densely populated cities have pockets of population that don't speak English. How can we ensure that those aspects of the community are served? So, intersect public safety with kind of a well-identified problem that is well beyond public safety, but leveraging kind of the technology experience that I have, over a 23-ish year career building architecture and cloud and applications So looking forward to kind of talking about how we're leveraging AI in an effort to enable people to communicate, especially in 911 and public safety.
Jehan, a little bit from you.
Yeah, my name's Jehan. My story is kind of interesting. I mean, I've been building things since I was 6, 7 years old, programming, building robots. That's kind of like what I've done, my whole life. Grew up in the UK, New Zealand, and Australia. I ended up actually doing my undergrad in Sydney, Australia. And when I was done, I basically wanted to keep building bigger things and said to my parents, I need to head over to the US. Can I get a ticket to get over there? They were gracious enough to let me do that. I came over to the US, kind of found my way a little bit, didn't really know a whole lot. I spent some time in the Valley, did some different things, and said, okay, I need to learn more. Ended up doing a PhD in machine learning and security at that point. And I learned a lot about kind of a few things I wanted to specialize in. At the tail end of that graduate school experience, we got one of the largest NSF grants ever awarded at the time, which was a public safety grant between UC San Diego and Irvine. And I started working on, started thinking about what would it be to build technology-based solutions to solve some of the problems that responders have. Fast forward many years later, and I went off and did some other things. I worked at Google, I worked on a few different things, advertising and things like that. But I always kind of wanted to come back to something where the mission was greater than the technology. And that's where I kind of found myself here back in at Motorola Solutions. And I mean, the company's mission is kind of, everyone knows about the Motorola brand, but it's not the company that makes cell phones. It's the company that is essentially solving for safety between enterprise and public safety. And, what better place to try to apply, some of those things that I learned back then and use a lot of what we're seeing today for a mission that is, I think, as Jeff and Rob said, is bigger than all of us. And I think all of us who are builders want to be able to leave behind something that benefits society in some way, so that, when we walked away from this, that, hopefully we're making lives better. And I can't think of any better mission than improving safety. And I think, that's why I think all of us are in this, and that's why certainly I'm here. So
Amazing. Good. Yeah. Thank you all for sharing some of your journey. To kick us off a little bit, I was going to take all of us on kind of a very brief history of AI. And so for roughly 4,800 years in human written history, there was no concept of artificial intelligence. Science fiction introduced the concept in 1872 in the novel Erewhon. The first claimed use of AI was actually to decode the Enigma machine in World War II. Very relevant to safety. Approximately 25 years after that, in 1967, ELIZA, a natural language processing system, was released and emulated a therapist, interestingly enough. Another 25 years later, in 1992, we got the Alice chatbot, which started passing the Turing test, a pretty big milestone in artificial intelligence and frankly in computing. Less than 10 years later, in 2002, we got the Roomba. Yes, a vacuum, but actually built from military robots designed to disarm bombs. In 2008, we got the first incarnation of Siri, which allowed us to verbally interface with our phones, a computer actually in our pocket, a huge advance. In 2014, we saw Alexa enter our homes, which allowed us to start navigating and aiding in our daily lives. In 2020, GPT-3 was introduced, which was a massive revolution in the general availability of AI systems and compute at the fingertips of most technologists, especially the four of us here on this panel. And in the 3 years since 2020, we've seen ChatGPT-4 and just an explosion of other LLMs, as well as visual and auditory other AIs emerging. And frankly, science is starting to say in some regards that we're beginning to approach the parameter equivalent of sections of the human brain on some of these. So just some massive acceleration of technology and AI, especially over time, but in the last 3 to 10 years, absolutely crazy. And so again, with that brief history and all of you guys as technologists, I'd love to start talking about how it's intersecting and starting to impact public safety. So Jehan, sort of starting with you, you mentioned Motorola continues to be a flagship technology company across the globe. How have you and your team been incorporating these immense advances in AI, in particular, into the public safety sector and your intersection there? Can you kick us off?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, I think, given the three of us, because I think the objectives and the outcomes are the same, but how we deliver value is going to be different just based on the product portfolio we have to deal with. So if I think about AI, I really try to think about what are the problems we're actually solving. So there's, on one hand, there's a lot of technology available. It's come a long way, especially in the last, I would say, 5 years, exponentially. How do we apply it? So from a company perspective, Motorola has a lot of products. We don't just build one product, which would change maybe how you think about this problem. So, our belief very much is that AI is not a, very specific one-size-fits-all solution. It needs to be distributed. By that I mean not just where you run it in terms of the compute that it takes, whether I run it on a camera or whether I run it on an appliance or in the cloud. It should be transparent. But then I think secondly, how do we actually release those features in a kind of a meaningful way? Now, given that we work on both enterprise security-based solutions and public safety solutions, which intersect at the time of emergency, obviously, the delivery mechanisms for those things are different. But whether we're developing new computer vision algorithms that go on our cameras, or we're developing something to be able to verify something a human has done as part of a document-based workflow, the big important part for us is, number one, end-to-end. Do I understand the guardrails of how this machine learning component is operating in the context of a larger system? And I think for that's why I think design-led thinking is very, very important to us. So we very rarely think about it as an AI problem. Especially these days, we kind of figure out what the human users of the system are going to be doing, which kind of guide our application of AI. In a lot of cases, our customers don't even know that they're using things that are powered by AI, and I truly believe this is how it kind of needs to be. Because at the end of the day, if you focus too much on the how, I think you lose sight of what you're actually trying to solve. So, I think this is really a long-winded way of saying that we don't really build solutions, point AI solutions. It's very much one cog in an end-to-end workflow, and where we deploy it, we have the flexibility to be able to deploy it in a lot of different places to optimize for the overall, goodness of the outcome, if you will. And Motorola, particularly being very much a human-to-human communication company founded on that principle, still has that today. Very rapidly with AI, we're moving to machine and then human-to-machine interfaces. And the development of those interfaces is probably more important than the actual underlying algorithms, and we spend a lot of time thinking about what those need to be at different points in the workflow.
I love that. For a human-centered industry like public safety, taking sort of a human-centered design approach is critical. And I think that's a great segue to Rob, something I'd love to dig in with you a little bit more on. ZeroEyes focuses, and I think I stole this directly from your marketing materials, but like a human verified AI backed gun detection system. You put that front and center, human verified. Can you explain to me the importance that you guys found in building ZeroEyes? Why having that human verified up front? And then do you ever see in the future, again, if any of you learned, a way of kind of moving the human verified to the background and just having it be AI? Like, what is the journey that you think you're on at ZeroEyes?
So I guess the first thing is the pragmatism of AI and how something is useful or not. And so what you have to do is A and B test everything and see what works and what doesn't work. Our first intent, I think, was without human verification. We're just like, we're going to let the customers deal with, any false positive that could ever occur, when it's wrong. And I think that the tools that we use for, whatever our AI does, or it's always going to be handicapped by the cameras right now for us, because that's what we're primarily focused on, is cameras. So optical. So garbage in is garbage out. So the quality of that. And I think that, perhaps in the future, the cameras will be such high resolution that, will be perfect, right? Perhaps, and we'll say that you said, put the human in the background only on very extreme cases where you have to interdict, right? You'll have the best outcomes that way. But right now, we are not at a point, I believe, where the cameras are perfect, where you really can do that effectively, right? So our first intent was, let's see what we could do, automate everything, the AI does it. And what we realize is that probably today, we're not at a point where that can happen, right? And in addition to that, we, build our algorithms on what currently exists today, all of our modeling, we do all of our own data, we record all of it on the same types of cameras that we're going to see. And that human in the loop that we use, I think there's a certain fear of AI run amok or whatever it is, that for us, we think is unfounded, just because, particularly in our use case, like we try to limit everything that we possibly could do. And when it really comes down to it, we try to communicate what we see to other people. And so RapidSOS is, the partner, and that's why we're here. Through RapidSOS, we communicate with another person what it is that we see, and we can do that in real time. And yes, I'd love to see a world in which that's, you eliminate all of that and the person who needs that information can immediately see it. But in our case, like a human, even when there's someone with a gun right here, right now, there's almost a shock of it that like you stop for like 5 full seconds, you're like, what? And so how do you use AI and you can get humans to make decisions based on AI? And how can you really do that without a human? Hey, I see what is potentially a total disaster in front of you. You need to do something right now. And just to get a text that tells you that, or whatever it is, what interface can we use to convince someone of the gravity that you need to respond immediately? A lot of the time, that's still going to be a person explaining something to you, telling you something. And how do we do that? So I think AI is incredible when we're task saturated and we have all of this data in front of us, and it's going to help us make decisions. We're going to use a person to do that. And I see that's where present is. I also see that in the future, but probably less human intervention.
Jeff, I wanted to bring you into the conversation here. Convey 911, you said the mission was to try to be more inclusive and be able to communicate more effectively to a wider population, and not be, say, hamstrung by the linguistics that we have and the barriers thereof is one of your major missions. You're also doing a great job of bringing in multimedia into the conversation here and into the pipeline. Rob alluded to really bringing a ton of data into it. Can you talk to me about the relationship that you see with the reason for trying to bring all of this multimedia into the pipeline, and how it's helping both your cause, but then also the use of AI on top of all of this data?
Yeah, sure. We thought about the communication problem that exists by starting and thinking about how do people communicate. They communicate over text, over voice, over video, standing next to each other. So, multimedia is a tool for communications at the end of the day. So for us to be able to leverage multimedia as a way to communicate, thinking about the hard of hearing community, but also be able to leverage AI as part of a situational awareness tool, and present findings or inferences into a workflow for a human to make a decision about. And kind of going back to what Jehan opened with, AI is this big scary thing that's up in the cloud, and it's not well understood. So it's hard to conceptualize the problem or problems that AI will solve. So thinking about it from the problem first, and then secondly, the workflow, the interface. How is the end user interacting with something that might be powered by or supported by AI? And John said, a lot of customers don't realize there's AI in these workflows. So it becomes kind of a tool in the toolbox, multimedia being one of them. But to kind of hone in on what Rob mentioned, garbage in, garbage out, it does take humans to be able to create the training data, to be able to say this thing is in fact this thing, so that when the models see that in the future, it knows that this thing is that thing. From language and the way that people communicate, there's so many intricacies in linguistics and dialects and regions. Having a pool of subject matter experts that can validate things from a train test point of view is difficult, because there's 350 dominant or not dominant, but known or kind of understood languages in the United States, 350 of them. So how do you ensure that AI models are trained in such a way where they can interpret what people are saying or how they're behaving in a way that kind of is in line with their culture, in line with the region and the dialect? So being able to use humans, and in our case, you know, we have a service that's powered by 22,000 human interpreters that are certified across a bunch of languages. So what better train test, you know, tool to be able to reinforce AI so that it can be applied across multimedia, video, voice, and text, you know, ensuring that you know, we're thinking about AI in a way where we can, you know, leverage it for utility and incorporate it at the right times in the right workflows, multimedia being you know, a key workflow as to how people communicate today.
I wanted to, we have about 9 minutes left. And so I wanted to possibly touch on one of the simplest and earliest forms of, again, call it AI, is autocomplete, right? It's the prediction of what comes next. I wanted to get all of your take on, and maybe Jehan in particular, with Motorola and the breadth with which you see, will we get to the place where we start predicting and potentially preventing incidents, you know, within public safety? Do you see that on the horizon? What do you think that would take? Or do you think we're pretty far off still from that? Talk to me a little bit about where prediction fits in.
It's actually very similar to what Rob said about people talking about AGI and things like that. I think it's on the horizon, but with an asterisk on what you actually mean by that. So AI is all about handling imperfection. Like, we would like the output from AI models or a multiplicity of AI models to be perfect, but the reality is that that is not the case. I think the question is, how do we handle imperfection in public safety for prediction purposes? But because everyone wants an early warning, this is why a lot of us are doing what we do, is to provide early warning. You don't want to be reactive. I would argue that AI actually helps a lot in the reactive workflow as well, where at that point you're trying to optimize for time saved, and time saved matters in our business. As we know, the business of safety, every second matters. But in terms of handling imperfection, the problem we have in incidents specifically is that there's a lot more data than there was 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, yesterday, right? So you have much more data, but there is much more noise, there's much more imperfection. So think about it as, on one dimension, AI models are getting better at handling imperfection, their ability to generalize, their ability to interpret something that may not be as perfect. Think about speech to text, things like that, that Jeff and Convey deal with. But it's multimodal. In other words, it's video, audio, text, structured data, and it comes from heterogeneous systems. Back to Rob's point, all cameras are not 8 megapixel with the same optics. So you have a problem of AI models are improving in generalizability, but then you also have a very, very diverse set of inputs. I truly believe the way to solve this problem is not going to be, let's get a perfect result out. And I think people are a lot more comfortable with AI thanks to things like ChatGPT. When you actually use it, ChatGPT is quite far from some of the things we have to deal with, but the ability to communicate with a machine with zero training should be an aspiration for all of us who are building software with AI. And so that is never more possible, or at least the possibility exists today. I think instead of focusing on, can we prevent crime, which I think is a little bit more nuanced, to how can we get humans to be the most efficient they can be in both communicating with an AI system and understanding what the AI system is guiding them towards, will be how we get more value out of early warning. The first phase of that was get more data in front of them, and RapidSOS does that today in being able to bring a lot of those signals to responders. But I think there is a large problem there still. How do we intelligently fuse, de-risk, and explain the outcome of all these different signals so I don't have to deal with 10 of them? Maybe I have to deal with fewer. And I think that is how, I think, to get to your question of prediction, it's not so much about prediction, it's about efficiency and explainability. I think that's where I think we need to go next.
I love that framing. And I think, I guess I'm going to pivot to Jeff and Rob a little bit to build upon that. We all provide technology into the sector. And with this sort of emergence of AI and some of this, like, oh, is this going to predict? Is it going to take away jobs? Like, there's anxiety around that. And I think from your seats, what are the best questions that people in the sector should be asking us as technologists when evaluating our products or evaluating any product and the use of AI and the application of AI? What are smart questions that we would recommend asking us, or asking anybody providing a technology into sector? Rob, I'd love your take, and then Jeff, follow up.
It's as easy as this. What problem does this solve? I think the ability to do something and then the actual use case are very different. So I think a lot of stuff gets pitched at AI that perhaps truly isn't, or is AI, but it doesn't necessarily solve an immediate problem that you may have. Because a lot of this is nascent, I don't know necessarily the wrong word, but like it's new enough to where we have a use case where it could work, but a use case where it actually works. Like, how is this solving a problem that I currently have? Because we have incredible access to data, more than we've ever had. And how do I make better decisions with the data that I have, whether it be, in the security space, video, audio, knowing whether doors are unlocked, knowing where the 911 calls are coming, knowing all of this stuff. What is the current problem that it solves? How does this make my life better today, right now? And that's, I think that's not answered a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of going back, and we keep talking about this theme of, at the end of the day, AI versus more traditional kind of computing solutions, it's still based on a problem. And the problem is addressed with a solution in the form of a tool or an interface. So, finding the right balance of leveraging AI in the right places and putting it in a workflow that doesn't kind of add complexity to what is a very transactional and need to be efficient workflow in 911. And then I'll throw an example. AI for speech to text and sentiment analysis. That transcription of what I'm saying in my language, in my dialect. AI models from various providers are going to come back with varying levels of accuracy, and a lot of the noise, a lot of the anomalies are going to contribute to the accuracy, but the accuracy indicator in and of itself can be an anomaly. What is the benchmark? So knowing when in a tool that is on the screen or in some type of interface, when AI needs to be supported with a human, what Rob said about human verification, the way that we're thinking about incorporating interpreters into a workflow that is conversational and driven by AI, but knowing when AI is maybe not doing the best job and how that tool is able to continue to seamlessly support the workflow in these kind of, where seconds matter kind of scenarios.
With our last minute or two, I'm a big believer, and we've sort of chatted before this on, as technologists and as people who are building and incorporating AI and advanced technologies into our systems, I'm a big believer in dog fooding, in utilizing the tools that we are selling into market to make sure that we understand them. So I'd love if we just go round robin, Jeff, Rob, Jehan, with what is the use of AI you're using personally these days, and maybe like what's your interaction with it?
Sure. So, top of the list, managing my calendar, the follow-ups of emails that get easily lost in all the noise, and using AI to take meeting notes. That in and of itself has been a game changer, because all of a sudden you come out of an hour-long conversation with a customer or a partner, and we've talked about a bunch of things and there's action items. That is a daily part of my AI tool set today.
Rob?
So in addition, we also do all of these meetings, and what do we do? So we try to figure out what people do and don't say and do a good job in our meetings. So recording our meetings and all of that is super helpful. I also do all of our shift planning and how we do that. We all use AI predictive models on what we think that we're going to need to employ in the future, what we need from a day-to-day basis. And it's never going to be right, but it helps us so much. And the more we feed that model, the better we get predicting it, how many people we need to monitor, or those kind of tools. So both in our meetings and like my day-to-day business, I use AI.
And actually, I will say, I'm surprised, guys, that your virtual assistants haven't joined this meeting, because every time we've talked, like somebody's virtual assistant has joined. Jehan, let's end it with you.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I'm a huge, believer in data, and, whether it's data for productivity or otherwise, just being able to consume and distill more of that. I think just one of the killer use cases for at least, what people think of as modern generative AI is summarization. And I think being able to get a broader view of the same things you were looking at, but being able to look at 10 times more data and still distill it down where it's consumable, that's a huge use case. I mean, lots of other tools in and around that workflow, but I think as the other two guys said, it's the same sort of thing. I can track time, I can track sleep, and everything from fantasy football results to everything else. It's just so much easier now to be able to actually create a workflow where you can be efficient about the things that you used to do. You just can do it quicker, and that means you can do more things. So that's generally the pattern for me.
I know that we're tight on time, so apologies to our time police here. I want to thank you guys sincerely. Great conversation. It's great preparing for this. I really enjoy the partnerships that we're building together, RapidSOS and all three of your organizations. If anybody has follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. All four of us are very open to answering and engaging, especially on these topics of technology, AI, multimedia in public safety. So once again, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of Ready23. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.